All right, team. So right now we're going to try and set up an activity feed. So what that is every time a user interacts with the site, so it adds a new project, creates a new comment, a new post, updates the project, adds an image, you get the point. We want to log the activity. And then what we want to do is we want to show that activity in a chronological feed on the main page so that we can see, like, keep the feed updated. So go, hey, there's a new project being added here, there's a new post, and it'll just keep constantly updating. So it just keeps the page nice and fresh. So let's jump in to see how I'm thinking of modeling that. So what you can see here, basically for an activity feed, these are some of the events that we want to be tracking. So a new project, when you add a new image to a project or a part, when you update a project, when you add a new post or you add a new post comment. So the way we're going to structure the event type will be the model name in the DB and then the action. So created or updated at this time. Then what I'm thinking for the model is we'll set up an activity item. So that means we can have many activity items with an ID, the owner type. So in the majority of cases, that'll be a user, but there could be system generated activity items. Then we're going to have the event, and then we're going to have the subject. So this is a post that's been created, then we'll have the subject ID and the subject type, and then also a data object if we want to store anything extra in there. Now, what I'm thinking is we will load all those items, and we'll just return the IDs of those items in the feed. Then as those items appear in view, so as you scroll through, we will go and fetch each item individually. I think that's the easiest way rather than trying to include all the relations for every single thing. And then what we'll do is we'll set up a little hook so that every time that thing comes into view, it'll show a loader. And then depending on the type, which we'll grab from the event, so if it's posts, we'll go and hit a post get route with the ID and then all the includes that we need. So everything will have different ways of looking. So a project image will have the image with a little link to the project, whereas a comment might have the post. So all these things are slightly different. So it adds a little bit of complexity. So let's jump into Prisma and see how we can model this out. Okay, so inside the project, we're going to jump into Prisma, and then we're going to open up the schema file. I'm just going to pull this one to the side, close it off. All right, so we will add in here a new model, and we're going to call that activity item. And then what we're going to have is we're going to have the ID there. And what else do we need? So now what we're going to do is we're going to have the owner ID, and that's going to be a string. All right, and this will be owner ID. Then we're going to have owner type. All right. Now, remembering that Prisma doesn't handle polymorphic, so this is a polymorphic table, but we will be able to fetch these things by saying fetch activity item where owner type is this and ID is this. But we won't be able to say activity item dot owner. So that's fine, because really all we need is the IDs, and we will fetch each item individually. Okay, so the next piece is the key. So this will be the event type. All right, that's a string. Then we're going to do the exact same thing here with the subject. So the owner is the person or the thing that created the activity, and then the subject is the subject of that activity. So the post. Then we don't actually need the data column right now, but what we will do, because we need this for sorting, is the created at and updated at. I'm just going to split these so it's easier to see here. And then I'm going to map this. And this will be activity items. All right, so we've listed all that. And that's that's pretty much the model. It's a very simple model, and I'm just, obviously this is not Facebook or Instagram where we're gonna have thousands of different activities and they do very unique things to keep the efficiency here. We're just looking for a very simple chronological feed. So later on, you know, we can, once we've built all these activity items, you can fan the activity IDs out into the users. It's a much more complicated flow, but it allows for, you know, custom feeds. We're not looking for that right now. We're just looking for a chronological feed on the front page of the app that just shows activity, really. So we'll keep moving on this one. All right, the next step that we want to do is we are going to run npm run migrate. All right, so we've just run the migration script. Let's jump into our database and just double check that. Activity items. So you can see here we've got the created at, the event type, which is just a string, owner ID, owner type, subject ID, subject type. And just double checking, these are all strings. And that's excellent. All right, so that's it. So we've seeded or migrated that. Now what we'll do is let's try and see how this is going to work. So every time, so for the first thing, let's do it when we create a new project. All right, so that'll be inside a server, Trpc, router, projects. Now, what we want to do is find the create project. So here's the create project. Now, when we run this, so now if we remember how we've done this before, we need to turn this into an async function, which it is. Now what we can do here is we can say const project is equal to await. Right. Close this off. And then we're going to return project. Now inside here, this is where we're going to create activity. All right. So once we've added that project, we now want to log this activity. So instead of awaiting this every time, like this is doing here, I think we should create some sort of wrapper, because this is going to become really quite messy. Every time we do this, we're going to have to say await, data, pass in the data, you know, as this happens, activity type, don't know where it's getting that from. It's called an event type. Would be, you know, project.created, and then we're going to have all our data. And you're going to see every time we're going to have to do this. If we ever want to rename this, it won't be activity, it'll be activity item. If we ever want to rename this or do anything different, we're going to have to come into about 100 places and change it. So instead of that, I think what we should do is set up a functions like create activity. And then all we're going to want to do in here is literally just pass through all the variables that we need. Right, so we'll pass through the owner type, right? And then what we can even do is we could probably feed this off into a job. I think that'll probably be the most future-proof, because if we ever want to fan out or do anything special, we can. We could, you know, we also want to be able to like group activity. So there's a whole bunch of logic that'll probably come in. So let's future-proof this a little bit and make sure that we're doing the right thing. So to do this, what we're going to set up is a little util. I think is probably what we want to do here. So let's do create activity item.ts. Okay, so this will be const create activity item, and then here we're going to say type create activity item params is equal to this. All right. I'm just going to grab this here for now. Don't need it, but just give me some space. Okay, export default, create activity item. Oh, and it'd be nice if I could spell activity as well. Activity item. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to import this. Do we have utils here? Yeah. Now, instead of doing this, we are going to just say, and we're going to await this. And let's make this async. And then what we're going to do here is we're just going to pass through all the variables that we need. So this would be this guy. And then we're going to say subject type is equal to project. Subject ID is equal to project.id. Just going to do that. Actually, no. And then the event, do we call it event type or, yeah, event type? Projects.created. All right. Okay, so that's our payload now. Now when we log an activity, that's all we have to do. All right. So we're going to just await that. Sick. All right. So let's go here. I'm going to grab all these. Just clean this up. Okay, so let's grab these. This is a string. This is a string. Guess what? They're all strings. So let's grab this, bang, bang, bang. Now what we can actually do is say an event type. And what is an event type? It's a string. And then what we're going to say is actually we're going to say const event types. And we're going to just grab these. And this is as const. All right, let's get rid of this for now. Now what we're going to say, an event type, okay, so we're saying an event type can be a key of any of those, right, for now. So as we go and allow more events, we'll add them into here. Okay, so now we are ready to go. So let's go. I think the next piece that we want to do is we want to set up a job that actually creates activity item. Or maybe we don't even need to do that for now. I think for now what we'll do is we'll just run it inline just for ease of use. So what we're going to do is we're going to import Prisma. All right, so let's just import the Prisma client. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go Prisma dot, and we're going to await this. And this will be called const activity item equals await Prisma dot activity item dot create and data. And we're going to just return the activity item. And what you would do here is now, like, you could have, when this gets more complex, we'll feed it off into a job, things that need to take longer to run. But what we can do is then we can fan out and we can check things. We can say, hey, does this activity item belong to which users are interested in this thing? And we can feed the ID of the activity item into their feed, which should store in an in-memory database like Redis or something. But we're going to keep it simple for now. We're not going to over-engineer this. So let's go event type. And literally, we're just going to pass all these variables in. And what are you saying? Okay, I've stuffed something up. Let me fix the type. I'll get it. Be right back. All right, so just a simple change there. So it's type of event types with the number index, and that gives us event type could be any of those. Now that error's gone away. All right, so it could be any of these things. Boom, done. All right, so that's that. So let's see what happens now. So we've got our create activity. What is this guy saying? Or undefined. Right. Realistically, create project is not. This is always set, but we'll just play along for here for now. Cool. Let's give it a spin. So we can currently see, if we jump in, there's no activity items. So let's go and create a project. Whoops, got to start up the old server. npm run dev. Let's go. Add a build. Yes. Let's add a Ford Ranger Raptor. Let's do something different. Let's go Toyota Hilux white. Create build. All right, there it is. Let's see. There's our activity. All right. So we've now got an activity ready to go. So the user who created it was this one. The event type was projects created, and then we got the subject ID, which is the new build ID here, and it's a project. Cool. All right. So let's go and fetch these feeds. Let's set up a new page so we can go and fetch the activity. All right. So we'll do that. Cool. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new page. It's going to just be called activity.tsx. And we're just going to copy this page. I mean, we can even call it activity feed. We do have the word feed used here, which will probably change. So maybe I'll just call this activity. It's just activity page. All right, so we're going to go activity items query, and this will be activity items dot get recent activity. I might even call it get activity items. Right, and the limit, what's the limit? Let's say 20. And this is going to be activity items. And I'm just going to, for now, just say activity here, because we don't know what this is going to look like yet. All right, so Trpc is complaining because we haven't set up this route, so let's go do that. Server, Trpc router, new file, activity items.ts. Let's copy this guy. And then we're going to go activity items router. And we're going to say get activity items. Public procedure, because we want that on the home page. Now this is activity item.find many. We don't need to include anything. And we want to sort order by. This is going to be the created at. And this will be descending, because we want the newest first. And we're going to have a limit. I think it's called take. Yeah, take. And this will be limit. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have an input. So let's just look at that. This is the input. Z object, so we need to import Zod. Z object, and now what we're going to have here is limit, and this is a number, and it's optional. Now we're going to say limit or 10. Now this is coming from input. We're going to say input.limit. Okay, so if we have an input limit, use it. Otherwise, we're just going to take 10. So that'll be the default. There we go. So now remember, we have to add it into here. So let's fix just activity items. Boom. And that's going to be activity items. Now we should see this little error's gone. Okay, so here's the activity page. Let's go to it. So it'll just be activity. All right, what do we have? An array of 1. There we go. So this new thing that I'm trying to implement is basically every module or every activity item will fetch its own data. So it'll have a whole bunch of like loading. And the cool thing about Trpc is it'll probably bulk all those initial requests. And then as we're scrolling, we want to go and pre-fetch more. So it's a new thing for me. So we're gonna give it a go, see what happens. So I just want to quickly set up the basic piece of this page as well. So we need a flex here. So just be, it's basic, we're call this recent activity. And then we need to bring those things in. Sweet, let's go there. There we go, recent activity. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to create a new component. And this component will be an activity item. Okay, I'm just going to create a new file. All right, so we're going to set up a component. And this will be activity item. And it is an activity item. And let's import that type. Yep. Great, great, great. And then all I'm going to do here is just do the ID. What are you complaining about? Got a duplicate. Okay, so I'm just renaming that so that we don't have a collision there. Okay, so now what we can do is we can import an activity item component. And we can now loop through our activity items. All right. So we've got the activity item component, given a key, and then we're passing in the item itself into this component. Let's see, there we go. All right, so there's our activity item. Great, looks awesome. So cool, love it. What we want to do now is, I mean, I can probably do it inside of here, but what we might do is just create a new hook here. So we're going to say use activity item. And we're going to create a function, so use activity item, and it's going to take in some params. We're going to export default use activity item. Now, here we're going to say use activity item options. That's to be an object, and then the first thing we're going to pass in is the activity item. And that's a string. Oh no, it's not. It's an activity item. So let's import that. And then the options will come in here. Okay. Sweet. So now we've got our hook set up. Let's pull it in here. Sweet. And then we're going to say here const payload. Yes, you know me now. No. Could probably just inline this just to make it a one-liner. All right. Let's see, are we still happy? Everything's happy. All right, so now what do we need to do? Now we need to figure out, depending on the activity item, so we're going to console, I'm just going to console log the activity item here. And just put in an object so it's easy to see. We have this. Now we have this event type. Right, we also have this subject. So we can now go and depending on the event type, we're going to render a different component, I think. I think that's what we want to do. So we're going to have subcomponents inside of an activity item and we will render those out. So in here, I'm going to have a component. And in here, I'm going to have, so this one will be called project created. All right. I'm very much just making this up as I go, so bear with me. So we're going to go project created. All right. So this will be and then what we're going to have here is we're going to have const components equals. And then depending on the key, right, so this will be projects.created. Gonna have this. Now, this is doing a weighted component. So let's just see what this looks like. So we're gonna say the component to render is going to be the activity item type. But what we're going to say is if no component return null. Okay, otherwise we're going to render the component. And what are we going to do inside this component? We're going to render that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pass in activity item payload. It's not called type, it's called event type. I'm just going to import the component directly. We don't need all this crazy stuff because this will always be there. So we're not going to get anything, gain anything. Let's see. Yeah, we don't need anything special. This is only if, if the code doesn't need to be there, but we're going to have this pretty much every time. So let's just use that. So what I've just done is I've imported that directly and then just putting it in there. Can figure out all the suspense stuff later. Cool. So now we have project created component. Let's try do something else as well. So what we can do is we'll go into that new project, which we just created. And we're going to ask a question. Now, before we do that, let's go and jump into our server, router, and then we're going to grab this little piece of gold and then here. So when we create a post, we queue the notification email, and now we're also creating activity. So this will be, and also, this is posts. So post created, we also need to import our create activity item. All right, we've got the user, owner type. Now here we're going to say post.id. All right, so now we can create our activity. So let's ask a question. Let's view the public page. And then just ask a question. Have you looked, what other colors did you consider before buying this one? All right, send that. Now let's see if our activity was created. There it is, post created. If we go back to our activity feed, you'll see this will be nothing there. But we have 2 activity items. Now why is that? That's because we haven't built this component. So we're going to create a new one that's going to be post created. All right, so I'm going to copy that, paste it in here. Where we have the word project, we're going to change it to post. And then in here, we're going to import that component. Now if we have post.created, we'll have this. So we just added our component and now we've got 2. And the cool thing about this is that because we have different components, we can render completely different things. You would have seen this in Facebook or Instagram, depending on if it's a video, if it's a story, if it's a reel, all those things render differently. So now we've given ourselves the creative freedom to do the same thing. So in the next video, we will build out those components and fetch the data. So catch you on the next one.